I did not raise my voice when my sister claimed they had not ordered for my son. I just watched my 8-year-old stare at the free bread basket she slid toward him, while her children ate steaks worth $150. She smiled like she had taught him a lesson about his place in this family. I looked at the waiter and decided the lesson would go both ways. My name is Violet Holmes, and for 36 years, I have been the ghost at my own family's banquet. I learned early on that silence was the rent I paid to occupy space in the Arden family orbit, a lesson drilled into me long before I became a mother myself. But tonight, sitting in the plush, oxblood leather booth at the Silver Marrow, one of Charlotte's most ostentatious steakhouses, I realized that my silence had become a debt my son was now expected to pay. The restaurant was a temple to excess. It smelled of aged beef, cigar smoke, and the specific, metallic scent of money-changing hands. The lighting was low, designed to flatter the wealthy and obscure the prices on the menu. We were there to celebrate Graham, my brother-in-law, who had just secured a promotion that apparently required a tab equal to a mortgage payment to properly acknowledge. My sister, Camille, sat at the head of the table, radiating the kind of polished, predatory glow that comes from a life where every obstacle is removed before your foot touches the ground. She was beautiful, in a sharp, manufactured way, her blonde hair perfectly blown out, her dress a shade of emerald that cost more than my first car. Beside her, Graham looked like every other mid-level executive who believes he is a titan of industry, flush with scotch and self-importance. My parents, Elliot and Marianne, flanked them like eager courtiers. They laughed too loudly at Graham's jokes, their eyes darting around the room to see who might be watching them dine in such splendor. And then there was us, me and my 8-year-old son, Noah. We were seated at the far end of the booth, the overflow section of the family, squeezed in near the service corridor where the waiters rushed by with trays of sizzling meat. The waiter arrived with the main courses. It was a choreographed performance. He placed a 20-ounce dry-aged ribeye in front of Graham. He set a delicate filet mignon before Camille. My parents received their surf and turf platters with trembling excitement. Then, the waiter placed plates before Camille's children, a 10-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. They had ordered the junior cuts, filet medallions with truffle fries and grilled asparagus. They picked up their heavy steak knives with the casual entitlement of children who have never known hunger. The waiter paused. He looked at the empty space of tablecloth in front of Noah. He looked at his tray, then back at his manifesto, clearly confused. He opened his mouth to ask if there had been a mistake. "Oh, don't worry about him," Camille said, her voice cutting through the ambient jazz like a glass shard. She reached for the communal bread basket that had been sitting in the center of the table, the free sourdough starter that every table received upon seating. With a smile that did not reach her eyes, she slid the basket across the white linen until it bumped against Noah's small chest. "We didn't order for your son," Camille announced, loud enough for the neighboring table to hear. "He's small. He doesn't need a full meal." The air at the table seemed to vanish. I felt the blood drain from my face, not from embarrassment, but from a cold, sharp rage that started in my stomach and seized my lungs. "Besides," she added, picking up her wine glass and inspecting the legs of the Cabernet against the light, "it's a waste to order a $40 entree for a child who probably prefers chicken nuggets. Bread fills you up faster. Right, Noah?" My son sat very still. He is a gentle boy, possessed of a quiet dignity that I have fought hard to preserve despite the chaos of my own upbringing. He looked down at the basket of bread. It was garlic buttered, slightly cold now, the leftovers that no one else wanted. Then he looked up at his cousins. He watched as they cut into their steaks, the pink juices running onto the china. He watched them take bites, chewing with their mouths open, laughing at something on their iPads. Noah did not cry. He did not ask why. He just folded his hands in his lap and shrank. He made himself smaller, trying to occupy less space, trying to match the value his aunt had just assigned to him. I looked at my parents. Surely, I thought, this was the line. Surely. Despite years of favoring Camille, They would not let their grandson be treated like a beggar at a feast. Camille is right, Violet, my mother, Marianne, said, not even looking at me as she buttered her lobster tail. You know how expensive this place is. We can't just be throwing money away on food he won't appreciate. The bread is perfectly fine. It is high-quality sourdough. Kids eat too much anyway. My father. Elliot grunted, sawing into his steak. He's getting a bit chubby around the face. Do him some good. And really, Violet, you shouldn't have brought him if you couldn't afford to feed him yourself. You know this isn't a Chuck E. Cheese. I didn't bring him because I wanted to, I said, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling under the table. I brought him because you insisted the whole family be here for the photo op. Graham chuckled. It was a wet, dismissive sound. He leaned back, spreading his arms along the top of the booth, encompassing his domain. Relax, Violet. Don't make a scene. We are just being practical. Look, I know things are tight for you. That little online thing you do, what is it? Virtual assistant? Data entry? Consulting, I said softly. Right. Consulting, Graham smirked, making air quotes with his steak knife. Freelance gig work? It's tough. We get it. That's why we're treating you to the experience. Just let the kid eat the bread. It's on the house. Consider it a perk. He looked around the table for approval. And he got it. Camille giggled. My parents nodded sagely, as if Graham had just dispensed pearls of financial wisdom instead of humiliating a child. They were all so comfortable in their cruelty. They believed, truly believed, that poverty was a character flaw and that wealth was a virtue. They assumed that because I drove a 5-year-old sedan and wore clothes that did not scream a brand name, I was destitute. They assumed that because I did not brag about my work had no value. They assumed I was weak. I looked at Noah again. He had reached out a hesitant hand and taken a piece of bread. He was about to eat it, not because he wanted it, but because he was obedient. He was accepting his place in the hierarchy. He was learning the lesson they were teaching him, that he was a second-class citizen in his own bloodline, that he was worth less than his cousins, that he should be grateful for scraps. I reached out and gently took the bread from his hand. Noah looked up at me, his eyes wide and watery. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm hungry." "I know, baby," I said, loud enough for the table to hear. "And you are going to eat, but you are not going to eat that." I placed the bread back in the basket and pushed it away, toward the center of the table. "Violet, stop being dramatic," Camille sighed, rolling her eyes. "Don't starve him just to spite me." I ignored her. I raised my hand. It was not a frantic wave, but a sharp, decisive gesture. A waiter, not our original server, but a younger man with sharp eyes, saw me immediately. He hurried over. "Yes, ma'am? How can I help you?" "My son has not ordered yet," I said. The table went quiet. Graham stopped chewing. Camille lowered her wine glass. "We want the seafood tower pasta," I said clearly. "The one with the main lobster tail, the king crab legs, and the saffron cream sauce. Market price?" The waiter blinked, surprised by the sudden escalation. "The Neptune's crown, ma'am. That is a very large portion, and it is—" "I know what it is," I said. "And for a side, he will have the truffle mac and cheese with the gold leaf crust. And for a drink," I looked at the menu, though I didn't need to, "he will have the sapphire mocktail, the one you serve in the crystal goblet with the dry ice smoke." "Violet," my mother hissed, "have you lost your mind? Look at the prices." "And," I continued, locking eyes with the waiter, "bring it out immediately. He has waited long enough." "Of course," the waiter said, scribbling furiously. Right away, as the waiter turned to leave, Graham let out a bark of incredulous laughter. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and shook his head, looking at me with a mix of pity and annoyance. "You really are something, Violet," Graham said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Trying to prove a point? That pasta costs more than your weekly groceries. I hope you enjoyed ordering it, because I need to be clear about something." He leaned forward, his face hardening. I am not paying for that. I am paying for the family meal. I am paying for reasonable expenses. I am not paying for a $200 bowl of noodles just because you want to play make-believe rich girl. If you can't pay for that when the bill comes, don't look at me to bail you out. The restaurant will call the police, and I will let them. Camille smirked, taking a bite of her steak. He's right, Vi. You can't order champagne on a beer budget and expect Graham to subsidize your delusions. You're going to embarrass yourself when the check comes. It's irresponsible, my father added, shaking his head. Teaching the boy bad habits. Living beyond your means is a sin. Violet, I listened to them. I let their words hang in the air, heavy and toxic. I watched Noah, who looked terrified that I had just committed a crime. I reached under the table and squeezed his hand. It's okay, I whispered to him. You deserve to be full. You deserve the best thing on the menu. Then I turned to Graham. I kept my face perfectly smooth. No anger, no tears, just a calm, flat surface that reflected his own ugliness back at him. Don't worry, Graham, I said. I am not asking you to pay for it. I would never ask you to pay for my son. Good, Graham scoffed. As long as we are clear. We are very clear, I said. The food arrived faster than usual. The waiter placed the massive, steaming plate of pasta before Noah. It was a masterpiece of culinary architecture, topped with a whole lobster tail and chunks of crab the size of a fist. The truffle mac and cheese shimmered with edible gold. The drink arrived in a cloud of theatrical smoke, blue and sparkling in the crystal glass. The silence at the table was deafening. Camille's children stared at Noah's food with open envy. Their fillets suddenly looked boring. The dry-aged steak seemed dry indeed compared to the feast spread before the cousin they had just mocked. Noah looked at me for permission. Eat, I said. It's yours. As Noah picked up his fork, his eyes lighting up with the first bite, I felt a presence over my shoulder. I turned my head slightly. Standing near the service station was a man in a pristine charcoal suit. He was not a waiter. He was the general manager of the Silver Marrow. He was holding a tablet, scanning the dining room floor. His eyes swept over our table, over Graham's loud posturing, over Camille's haughty demeanor, and then they landed on me. For a second, he frowned, as if trying to place a face out of context. Then, his eyes widened. It was a flicker of recognition, sharp and absolute. He knew who I was, not Violet the poor sister, not Violet the single mother with the online job. He took a step forward, his posture shifting from oversight to service. He caught my eye. He made a subtle movement, beginning to bow, ready to rush over and greet a VIP, ready to ask why I was sitting in the back corner, ready to offer the private room. I gave him a nearly imperceptible shake of my head. Not yet. He paused. He understood. He straightened up, but he did not look away. He nodded once, a deep, respectful incline of his head. Acknowledging the command, he stood there, watching, waiting for my signal. I turned back to my family. Graham was lecturing my father about tax brackets. Camille was scolding her daughter for staring at Noah's lobster. They had no idea that the power in the room had just shifted. They thought they were eating with a pauper. They did not know they were dining with the executioner. Is it good? I asked Noah. He nodded, his mouth full of lobster and saffron cream. It's the best thing I ever ate, he whispered. Good, I said, picking up my glass of water. Enjoy it, because everything is about to change. To understand why a basket of stale sourdough bread could trigger a war, you have to understand that the bread was never just bread. It was a symbol. It was a tangible reminder of a hierarchy that had been constructed before I was even born, a structure built on the bedrock of my submission and my sister's glorification. Growing up, the Arden household operated on a simple, brutal law of physics. Camille was the sun, massive and radiant, and the rest of us were merely planets condemned to orbit her, grateful for whatever warmth she decided to cast in our direction. Camille was the golden child in the truest sense. She was blonde where I was mousy. She was effervescent and charming where I was watchful and silent. She was the one who could walk into a room and make the air feel lighter, while I was the one who stood in the corner, absorbing the shadows so she could shine brighter. My parents, Elliot and Marianne, did not just favor her, they curated her, to them. Camille was not just a daughter, she was an investment. She was the vessel for all their social aspirations. The one who would marry well and elevate the family name from comfortable to envied. I, on the other hand, was the insurance policy. I was the reliable one, the sturdy one, the one who was expected to handle the messy, unglamorous reality of life, so that Camille's hands never had to touch dirt. I remember when I was 12 years old. My father had promised to take me to a science camp I had been begging to attend for months. I had saved my allowance. I had packed my bag 2 weeks early. 3 days before we were supposed to leave, Camille was invited to a debutante workshop in Charleston. It was a frivolous thing, a weekend of learning how to hold a teacup and walk with a book on one's head. But Camille wanted to go. The dates conflicted. My father could not drive us both. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the brochure for the science camp crinkled in my gripping hands. Waiting for him to figure out a solution, I expected a compromise. Instead, my mother placed a hand on my shoulder, heavy and final. "Violet, honey," she had said, her voice dripping with that sickeningly sweet condescension that I would come to loathe. "You understand, don't you? This is a huge opportunity for your sister to make connections. Science camp will always be there, but Camille, she needs this. You are the strong one. You can handle the disappointment. Camille is too sensitive." That was the refrain of my life. You are the strong one. It was not a compliment. It was a command. It meant that my feelings were durable enough to be trampled on, while Camille's were fine china that must be protected at all costs. I gave up my room when Camille came home from college with too much luggage. I gave up my college fund when Camille needed a fresh start in New York after a bad breakup. I gave up my voice because every time I tried to speak, I was told I was being dramatic, that I was jealous, that I was making everything about me, so I learned to be quiet. I learned that in the Arden family. Love was a finite resource, and Camille had monopolized the supply. This dynamic did not end when we left home. It metastasized. When Camille married Graham, it was treated as a coronation. Graham was the final piece of the puzzle, a man with a jawline, a title, and a salary that allowed my parents to brag to their friends at the country club. They had won. Camille had secured the bag. Then, I became pregnant with Noah. I was unmarried. I was alone. I did not offer a wealthy son-in-law or a grand wedding at a vineyard. I offered only a scandal to my parents. Noah was not a grandchild. He was evidence of my failure. He was a stain on the pristine portrait they were trying to paint. While they bought Camille a new SUV for her baby shower, they sent me a card with a $50 gift certificate to a discount grocery store and a note that read, "Hope this helps you get on your feet." They loved the narrative. God, how they loved it. It validated everything they had always believed. Camille was the princess in the castle, and Violet was the cautionary tale. They needed me to be the loser. My struggle made their success feel earned. My poverty made their wealth feel sweeter. If I was doing well, then their neglect was cruel. But if I was a disaster, then their neglect was actually tough love. They convinced themselves they were helping me by shunning me, teaching me responsibility by letting me drown, and I let them believe it. For the last 8 years, I have carefully constructed a mirror for them, reflecting exactly what they wanted to see. I drive a reliable, 5-year-old sedan that blends into the pavement. I wear clothes that are clean and well-tailored but devoid of logos. Cotton blends, simple cuts. Nothing that screams money. I rent a small, 2-bedroom townhouse in a quiet, unpretentious neighborhood. To them, this screams struggle. To me, it screams freedom. They see my life as a series of constraints. They do not see the peace in it. They do not know that the sedan has a custom-tuned engine and bulletproof glass. They do not know that the simple clothes are bespoke commissions from a tailor in Milan who values fabric quality over branding. They do not know that I own the townhouse, along with the entire block it sits on, through a holding company that lists a generic P.O. box in Delaware. I kept the truth from them not because I was ashamed of my success, but because I knew them too well. If they knew what I really did, if they knew the sheer scale of the empire I had built from my laptop while they were busy judging me, they would not suddenly love me. They are incapable of loving me. They would only love my money. They would drain me dry, just as they drained themselves to prop up Camille's facade. And they were drained. That was the secret irony that kept me warm on cold nights. My parents were not rich. They were leveraged. They lived on credit and appearances. Terrified of the house of cards collapsing. 2 years ago, my father faced a massive tax lien. He had forgotten to file capital gains on a property sale to fund Graham's investment idea. The IRS was threatening to seize their primary residence. I sat at their dining table as my mother wept, wringing her hands, talking about the shame, the humiliation. "Camille can't know," she had sobbed. "She has so much stress with the new house. We can't burden her." They could not burden the rich daughter. But they could cry in front of the poor one. The next day, the lien was quietly purchased and satisfied by an entity named Archon Solutions. My parents received a notification that it had been an administrative error, resolved by a third-party audit. They attributed it to divine intervention. Later that week, I heard my father on the phone with Graham, thanking him. "I know you pulled some strings with your finance buddies." "Graham," my father said, his voice thick with gratitude, "you saved us, son. You're a miracle worker." Graham, of course, took the credit. He didn't deny it. He just laughed that oily laugh and said, "Family looks out for family. Elliot, I paid $28,000 to save their home, and they thanked the man who would have let them burn." I swallowed that rage. Just as I had swallowed every other slight, I did it for Noah. I wanted him to have grandparents, even if they were flawed. I wanted him to have cousins. I told myself that I could absorb the toxicity so he wouldn't have to. I taught him to be polite. I taught him to say please and thank you, even when people were rude. I taught him that his worth was internal, that it did not matter if he had the newest sneakers or the biggest steak. "Don't let anyone judge you by the plate in front of you," I would tell him. "You are a king in your own mind." But tonight, watching him stare at that breadbasket, I realized I had made a terrible calculation. I thought I was teaching him humility. In reality, I was training him to be a doormat. I was teaching him to accept the scraps, just like I had. I was teaching him that because we didn't scream for attention. We didn't deserve to be fed. When Camille pushed that basket toward him, she wasn't just withholding food. She was initiating him. She was welcoming him into the family tradition of making sure the Holmes branch knew their place beneath the Arden branch. She was looking at my son, my brilliant, kind, innocent son, and deciding that he was lesser, and my parents, the people whose roof I kept over their heads, whose medical bills I had quietly settled when their insurance lapsed last winter, whose dignity I had purchased with checks they would never see. They sat there and nodded. Kids eat cake. Kids eat bread. Kids don't matter. I looked at Noah, happily devouring his lobster now. Unaware that the meal was an act of war, he was smiling. He felt special. And in that moment, the wall I had built around my secret life crumbled. Not the wall that protected my privacy, that was still useful, but the wall that protected my family from the consequences of their own cruelty. I had hidden my power to keep the peace, but there was no peace here. There was only submission. They didn't love Violet. They loved the poor Violet who made them feel rich. They loved the screw-up Violet who made them feel competent. They loved the punching bag. Well, the punching bag just hit back. I took a sip of my water, watching Graham pontificate about his new promotion, about the strategic oversight role he was stepping into. He was preening like a peacock, unaware that the feathers he was displaying were already plucked. He thought he was untouchable because he had a corporate card and a loud voice. He didn't know that the petty online work he mocked me for was actually forensic accounting and high-level corporate compliance auditing. He didn't know that my firm, Blackridge Compliance, specialized in hunting down executives exactly like him, men who thought expenses were income and arrogance was a shield. He didn't know that I wasn't just the sister-in-law he bullied at dinner. I was the wolf waiting at the door of his career. I looked at my mother, who was delicately picking at her salad, avoiding my eyes. I looked at my father, who was still grumbling about the price of the pasta. I looked at Camille, who was busy texting, probably telling her friends about the charity she was performing by dining with us. I was done. I was done paying their debts in the dark. I was done letting them think they were the sun. Tonight, the orbit would break. I wasn't going to just buy my son a lobster. I was going to buy the truth, and the price would be everything they thought they owned. "Mom," Noah said, pulling me from my thoughts. "Can I have some of the bread now? To dip in the sauce?" I smiled at him, a genuine, terrifyingly calm smile. "You can have anything you want. Noah," I said, my voice soft but carrying a weight that felt like iron. "You never have to ask for the bread again. From now on, we own the bakery." I didn't say it loud enough for them to hear. Not yet. The reveal had to be timed perfectly. It had to hurt. It had to be a lesson that would scar over and remind them, every time they looked at us, that they had made a fatal error in judgment. I watched the waiter refill Graham's wine glass. I watched Graham check his watch, likely anticipating the moment he could slam his corporate card on the table and play the benefactor one last time. "Go ahead, Graham." I thought, "Enjoy the vintage. It's the last thing you'll ever taste that isn't ash." My family believes I work in the digital equivalent of a sweatshop. To them, the hours I spend on my laptop are devoted to data entry, virtual assistants, or perhaps filling out endless surveys for pennies. They imagine I live paycheck to paycheck, scraping together rent for my modest townhouse by performing the menial tasks that the Grahams of the world outsource so they can focus on big-picture strategy. It is a convenient fiction. It allows them to pity me while feeling superior, a combination that acts as a potent drug for their egos. If they knew the truth, the air in this steakhouse would turn to ice. I am not a virtual assistant. I am the founder and lead auditor of Blackridge Compliance Group. We are a boutique firm, invisible to the general public but well known in the boardrooms of the Fortune 500. We do not do taxes. We do not do standard bookkeeping. We are the people you call when the numbers stop adding up, when the profit margins bleed out into unexplained voids, and when the shareholders start asking questions that the CEO cannot answer. We are the cleaners. We are the forensic accountants who specialize in internal fraud, embezzlement, and executive misconduct. And 3 weeks ago, the board of directors for Kestrel North Systems, the very company where Graham had just been promoted to regional director of operations, retained my firm to conduct a quiet, comprehensive audit of their logistics division. They had noticed irregularities, a hemorrhage of capital disguised as vendor relations and logistical overhead. They gave me root access to their financial servers, their expense reporting software, and their internal communication logs for the past 20 days. My team and I have been building a profile of the leak. We traced IP addresses, we cross-referenced merchant codes, we matched timestamps on receipts to GPS data on company phones. The leak has a name. It is Graham Arden. I sat there, sipping my water, watching Graham swirl his scotch. He looked so confident, so assured of his ascendancy. He had no idea that I had spent the morning staring at a digital map of his life, color-coded by theft. I knew about the client dinners that were actually dates with his mistress in Savannah. I knew about the office supply invoices that were actually payments to a high-end electronics boutique where he bought gaming consoles and drones. I knew about the consulting fees paid to a shell company registered to a P.O. box that, upon physical inspection by one of my field agents, turned out to be a UPS store 3 miles from Graham's gym. And I knew about tonight. I had seen the pre-authorization ping on the Kestrel North corporate Amex 2 hours ago. The notification had popped up on my encrypted dashboard while I was getting Noah dressed. The Silver Marrow, table for 8, estimated total $2,000. Graham was not just paying for dinner with company money. He was burying a family celebration inside a budget line item for client acquisition. He was likely going to mark my father down as a potential investor and Camille as a strategic partner. He was expensing his arrogance. Under the table. I slid my phone out of my purse. To my family. It looked like I was checking a text message. Perhaps a reminder from a bill collector. In reality, I was opening the secure admin portal for the Kestrel North audit. I tapped the icon for my executive assistant, Tessa. She was currently stationed in our secure server room in Chicago, monitoring the real-time feed. Target is active. I typed, the Silver Marrow, Charlotte. He is using the Platinum corporate card ending in 4098. He is currently bragging about a promotion he is using to steal more money. Initiate Phase 2. A moment later, 3 dots danced on the screen, followed by Tessa's reply. Received. Violet. We have enough historic data to prove a pattern of intent. Do you want to flag the transaction for later review, or do you want to move to active containment? I looked up at Graham. He was leaning over the table, explaining to my father how smart money works. You have to leverage your assets. Elliot, Graham was saying, gesturing with a forkful of ribeye. You can't just let cash sit. You have to make it move. That is what I tell my team. If you are not aggressive, you are dying. That is brilliant, son, my father said, nodding with the reverence of a disciple. I wish I had your head for business. It is a gift, Graham shrugged, feigning modesty. But honestly, it is about knowing what you are worth and taking it. I looked down at my phone. Active containment. I typed, execute the Blackline protocol. Trigger an immediate freeze on all discretionary spending for his accounts based on suspicious activity in non-compliant sector. Do it now. Copy that, Tessa replied, locking the card in 3, 2, 1, done. The next time he swipes, the terminal will scream. I locked my phone and placed it face down on the tablecloth. A cold, electric thrill ran through my veins. It was not joy. It was not excitement. It was the satisfaction of a mathematician solving a complex equation. Graham had spent years treating me like a variable that could be rounded down to 0. He did not realize that I was the one writing the formula. The trap was set. It was a legal snare, tight and invisible. I did not need to scream at him. I did not need to flip the table or throw wine in his face. I simply needed to let him be himself. I needed him to walk to the edge of the cliff, confident in his ability to fly, and then simply turn off gravity. I turned to Noah. He had finished his pasta and was now carefully picking the gold flakes off his mac and cheese, examining them on his fingertip with wonder. He looked up at me, his eyes bright, the shadow of the breadbasket incident already fading from his immediate memory. "Mom," he whispered, "is it real gold?" "It is," I said quietly. "Why do they eat gold?" he asked. "Does it taste better?" "No," I said, smoothing his hair. "It tastes like metal. They eat it because they want to show everyone else that they can afford to waste it. It is not about the taste. Noah, it is about the show." "I don't need to show off," Noah said, licking the flake from his finger. "I just like the cheese." "That is because you have something they don't," I told him, leaning in close so only he could hear. "You have substance. You are real. Never let them make you feel small. Noah, they are loud because they are empty. You are quiet because you are full." I needed him to understand this. I needed him to know that the humiliation he felt earlier was not a reflection of his worth, but a projection of their insecurity. Graham and Camille needed to crush us to feel tall. They needed the contrast, without poor Violet. Rich Camille was just a woman with a maxed-out credit card and a hollow marriage, without loser Noah. Winner Graham was just a thief in a suit. "We are going to be okay, right?" Noah asked, a lingering anxiety in his voice. He was smart. He sensed the tension radiating off me, even if I kept my face calm. "We are better than okay," I promised him. "We are the ones holding the keys." I looked back at the table. Graham was signaling the waiter for another round of drinks. He was ordering the 25-year-old scotch this time. He was celebrating. He was adding another $100 to a bill he could not pay. "Bring the bottle," Graham commanded the waiter, "and bring the dessert menu. My nieces and nephews need something sweet. And get the check ready. I want to settle up before the rush." "Of course, sir," the waiter said. I watched the waiter walk away. I watched the numbers tallying up in my head: the steak, the wine, the scotch, the lobster, the desserts. It was going to be a bill close to $2,500. Graham didn't have that kind of money in his personal account. I knew because I had audited that too as part of the lifestyle compatibility check required for the fraud investigation. He had less than $400 in his checking account. He was living entirely on the float, using the company card to pay for his life, then moving money around to cover the minimums on his personal cards, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and assuming Kestrel North was too big to notice the missing change. But Kestrel North had noticed, and they had hired me to stop it. Camille leaned over to me, her smile tight and predatory. "I hope you enjoyed the show, Violet," she said, gesturing to Noah's empty plate. "Graham is very generous to let you order that. Most men would have put their foot down. You should thank him." "I will," I said, my voice pleasant and neutral. "I will thank him appropriately." "You know," Camille continued, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "we were thinking, since Graham's promotion comes with a significant raise, maybe we could help you out. Not with money. Obviously, we don't want to enable you, but maybe Graham could get you an interview for a cleaning position at his office building. The night shift. It pays better than whatever you're doing on the internet, and it comes with benefits. You could finally get Noah some decent clothes." She thought she was being benevolent. She thought she was offering me a lifeline. In reality, she was offering me a mop to clean the floors of the building I was currently in the process of forensically disassembling. "That is very thoughtful, Camille," I said, "but I think my current schedule is about to get very busy." "Suit yourself," she sniffed, turning back to her husband. "I try to help, Graham, but she is just so stubborn. She likes being at the bottom." I looked at my watch. The transaction freeze had been active for 4 minutes. The system was live. The trap was armed. Graham laughed at something my father said. Leaning back and patting his stomach, he looked like a king on his throne. He had the beautiful wife, the adoring in-laws, the expensive meal, and the illusion of power. He had successfully humiliated his sister-in-law and marginalized her son. He had won the evening, but the evening wasn't over. I looked at the bread basket, still sitting in the center of the table, ignored and cold. Camille had used it as a weapon. She had used it to tell my son he was worth nothing more than the free filler. She had used it to define our value. I reached out and took a piece of the bread. I tore it in half, slowly, deliberately. Bread is a funny thing. In the Bible, it is a symbol of life. In history, the lack of it causes revolutions. In my family, it was a tool of shame. But in my line of work, bread has a different meaning. We talk about breadcrumbs, the little digital trails that thieves leave behind when they think no one is looking. The small swipes, the extra appetizers, the gas station fill-ups, the breadcrumbs lead you to the loaf, and the loaf leads you to the thief. Graham had been dropping breadcrumbs for 2 years, and tonight he had dumped the whole basket on the table. He thought he was feeding us charity. He didn't realize he was feeding me the final piece of evidence I needed to close the case file. "You know, Camille," I said, speaking up just as the waiter returned with the dessert menus, "you were right earlier." "About what?" she asked, distracted by the options for crème brûlée. "About the bread," I said. "It does fill you up, but you have to be careful." "Why?" Graham asked, smirking. "Because if you eat too much of it," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "You choke," Graham rolled his eyes. "You are so weird. Violet, just order a coffee and be quiet." "Okay," I said. "I will be quiet." I sat back. I folded my hands. I waited. The bill was coming. The curtain was rising, and the bread was about to become the most expensive thing Graham Arden ever touched. At the table, They hand out bread like charity. In my world, bread is evidence. The arrival of the bill at a table like ours is usually a ceremonial event. It is the moment the patriarch, or in this case, the pretender to the throne, cements his status. Graham watched the waiter approach with the black leather folder as if he were a general accepting a surrender. He did not flinch. He did not reach for his reading glasses to check the total. He simply extended his hand, palm open, waiting for the document to be placed into his custody. The waiter, a professional who had seen thousands of men like Graham posturing for their in-laws, set the folder down gently. "Whenever you are ready, sir," the waiter said. Graham didn't even open it. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced the heavy metallic Kestrel North Systems corporate card. It made a distinct clack as he tossed it onto the table, right on top of the leather folder. "No need to check," Graham announced, his voice booming slightly, ensuring the table next to us, and my parents, heard him. "Add 20% for yourself. Excellent service." "Thank you, sir," the waiter said, picking up the folder and the card with a practiced bow. My father, Elliot, beamed. "You are too generous, Graham. Really, a fine meal." "It is nothing, Elliot," Graham said, leaning back and unbuttoning his suit jacket. "When you work at my level, the company expects you to treat your circle well. It is part of the brand image." I sat quietly, sipping the last of my ice water. My heart was not racing. My hands were not shaking. I felt a strange, detached calm, like a demolition expert watching the countdown clock tick toward zero on a building that has already been evacuated. I knew exactly what was happening in the digital ether. I knew that the transaction request was currently traveling from the restaurant's point-of-sale system to the merchant bank, and from there to the credit issuer, where it was colliding headfirst with the Blackline protocol block I had authorized 10 minutes ago. The conversation at the table turned to dessert wine. Camille was speculating about whether they should order a bottle of Sauterne to finish the night. Then, the waiter returned. He did not walk with the same fluid, invisible grace as before. His steps were brisk, clipped. He did not bow. He walked to Graham's side of the table and leaned down, keeping his voice low, discreet. "I am sorry, sir," the waiter whispered, though in the sudden silence of our table, it sounded like a shout. "The card was declined," Graham laughed. It was a reflexive sound, a barrier thrown up against reality. "Don't be ridiculous," he said loudly. "It is a platinum corporate account. There is no limit. You probably chipped it wrong. Swipe it again." "I did, sir," the waiter said, his face impassive. "I tried the chip 3 times. I also tried to key it in manually. The system is returning a do not honor code. It has been flagged for security." The air was sucked out of the booth. My father stopped chewing his toothpick. Camille froze, her hand halfway to her wine glass. "That is impossible," Graham snapped, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. "I used it this morning. There is plenty of budget on it. Your machine is broken. Go try it at another terminal." "I tried 2 different terminals, sir," the waiter said, his patience thinning. "The issuer has locked the card." Graham snatched the card back from the waiter, staring at it as if it had betrayed him. He looked at the magnetic strip, then at the chip, as if willing them to work by sheer force of personality. "Fine," Graham spat. "Stupid bank glitches. They probably flagged the location because I'm traveling. Here." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a personal card. It was a standard consumer credit card, blue and battered. I knew the limit on that card. I knew the balance. I knew he was hovering within $50 of the cap, because he had used it to put a down payment on the rental car sitting in the parking lot, the one he claimed he had bought. "Use this one," Graham said, his voice less booming now, more brittle. The waiter took it and walked away. The silence that followed was excruciating. It was the sound of an illusion dissolving. Graham tapped his fingers on the table, a frantic, staccato rhythm. He wouldn't look at Camille. He wouldn't look at my father. He stared at the kitchen doors, willing the waiter to come back with a receipt and a pen. "It happens all the time." My mother, Mary Ann, chirped nervously. Computers are so unreliable these days. Just last week, the grocery store machine froze on me. Exactly, Graham said, seizing the excuse. Just a glitch? The waiter returned. This time, he was accompanied by the floor manager, the man who had recognized me earlier. The manager held the blue card in his hand. Mr. Arden, the manager said, his voice polite but firm. I am afraid this card has also been declined. Insufficient funds. Graham looked like he had been slapped. What? Insufficient funds, sir, the manager repeated, slightly louder. We attempted to run the card for the full amount, and then for a partial payment, but both were rejected. The table was now the center of attention for the entire dining room. People were turning in their seats, the couple at the next booth, who had been admiring Graham's loud generosity earlier, were now exchanging amused glances. Graham was drowning. I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that he had no third option. He had no cash. His other cards were maxed out. He was sitting in a 5-star steakhouse with a bill that exceeded the monthly rent of most people in the city, and he had zero means to pay it. Camille, realizing her husband was paralyzed, went into survival mode. She needed a reason. She needed a villain. She looked around the table, her eyes frantic, until they landed on me, or rather, on Noah's empty plate. It is her fault, Camille practically shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. The manager blinked, confused. Ma'am? It's Violet, Camille insisted, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. She ordered that ridiculous lobster tower, that monstrosity. It pushed the bill over the usual limit. The credit card company probably saw a transaction that was way higher than normal because she decided to gorge her son on food he doesn't even understand. It was a logic so twisted, so desperate, that it was almost impressive. She was claiming that my son's meal had triggered a fraud alert on a corporate card that was supposedly limitless. Camille is right, my mother chimed in, grasping at the lifeline. Violet, you insisted on that expensive dish. You probably flagged the system. You know Graham usually keeps things reasonable. Reasonable? I repeated, my voice calm. Graham ordered a bottle of scotch that cost $400. He ordered steaks for your grandchildren that cost $150 each. My son's pasta was expensive. Yes, but it was a fraction of the total. Don't argue with us, Violet, my father hissed, leaning across the table. Fix it. You caused this scene. You embarrassed Graham. Do you have any money? Give it to Graham so he can settle this and we can leave. You want me to pay? I asked. It is the least you can do, Graham said, finding his voice again now that he had a scapegoat. You wanted to play big shot with the menu. Now put your money where your mouth is. Cover the bill. Violet, I will pay you back when the bank sorts out this glitch on Monday. He held out his hand, expecting me to empty my purse. He expected me to pull out my emergency savings, or perhaps a credit card I had been saving for a rainy day. He expected me to sacrifice myself to save his ego, just as I had done 1,000 times before. I looked at his hand. I looked at the manager, who was watching me with a mixture of professional curiosity and hidden respect. He knew I could pay the bill. He knew I could buy the restaurant if I wanted to. I reached into my purse. The relief on my parents' faces was instantaneous. They slumped back, satisfied that order had been restored. The scapegoat was bleeding so the golden children could survive. I pulled out a small, sleek wallet. I opened it and withdrew 3 crisp $100 bills. I placed them on the table, right next to the rejected credit cards. What is this? Graham asked, staring at the cash. The bill is $2,400. Violet, this is $300. I know math, Graham, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. I ordered the Neptune's crown for Noah. It was $180. I had an iced water. It was free. I am adding 20% for the tip because the service was impeccable, and another $50 for the inconvenience we caused the staff. I pushed the 3 bills toward the manager. This covers my son and myself, I said clearly. I am paying for what I ordered. The rest of the bill belongs to Mr. Arden, It is his party. It is his promotion. It is his responsibility. You can't do that, Camille gasped, her face turning pale. You can't just leave us here. We don't have, Graham's cards are having an issue. You have to help family. Family feeds family. Camille, I said, looking down at her. Family doesn't offer a hungry child a breadbasket and tell him he isn't worth a meal. You told me earlier that I shouldn't expect Graham to subsidize my life. Well, I am returning the favor. I am not subsidizing yours. I turned to Noah. Come on, baby. We are leaving. Noah slid out of the booth, clutching his small action figure. He looked at his cousins, who were sitting in stunned silence, their forks frozen halfway to their mouths. Violet, my father shouted, actually standing up now. If you walk out that door, do not expect us to forgive you. You are humiliating us. No, Dad, I said, looking him in the eye. You are humiliated because the check arrived, and for the first time in your life, you are sitting at a table where no one else is willing to pick it up for you. I took Noah's hand and walked away. I did not look back. I heard Graham arguing with the manager. I heard him demanding to speak to the owner. I heard the manager politely informing him that if payment was not rendered, the police would be called. I kept walking. We stepped out of the restaurant and into the cool night air. The valet stand was busy. Expensive cars were lined up. Mercedes, BMWs, Range Rovers. My family followed me out a few minutes later. I don't know how they resolved the bill. Perhaps Graham gave them his watch, or perhaps they called a friend to bail them out over the phone. But they looked disheveled and furious. Graham was sweating through his shirt. Camille was crying. Her mascara smeared. My parents looked aged. Their posture collapsed. They saw me standing near the curb with Noah. I hope you are happy, Camille spat, as she stormed past me toward the parking lot where their new car was parked. You ruined everything. You are a selfish, jealous little witch. We are leaving, my father grunted, refusing to look at me. We are squeezing into Graham's car. There is no room for you. Don't ask for a ride. I don't want you dirtying the leather seats with your attitude. You can call a cab, Graham sneered, regaining a shred of his nastiness now that he was away from the manager. If you can afford one with your $300, don't worry, I said. I don't need a ride. Good, Camille yelled back. Because you aren't getting one. Have fun waiting in the cold. They marched toward a white luxury SUV parked in the distance, the rental with the dealership sticker still faintly visible on the bumper. Just as they reached for the door handles, a pair of headlights swept across the parking lot, blindingly bright. A sleek black sedan, a top-of-the-line Audi A8L security model, elongated and armored, glided silently to the curb, stopping exactly in front of where Noah and I were standing. The driver, a man named Marcus, who had been my security detail for 3 years, stepped out. He was dressed in a suit that cost more than Graham's entire wardrobe. He didn't look at my family. He walked around the car, opened the rear door, and bowed his head to Noah. Good evening, Master Noah, Marcus said. I have the heated seats on for you, and I have that playlist you like queued up. Noah's jaw dropped. For real? For real, Marcus smiled. My family froze. They stood by their rental car, their mouths agape, watching as the poor relation was ushered into a vehicle that reeked of true, unassailable power. Marcus turned to me and held the door. Ms. Holmes, shall we head to the residence, or do you have another stop? Home, Marcus, I said. We have had a long night. I slid into the back seat. The leather was soft, smelling of vanilla and success. I looked out the tinted window. I saw Graham standing there, his key fob in his hand, looking at my car like he was seeing a ghost. I saw Camille, her face twisted in confusion and fear. They looked small. They looked insignificant. As the door clicked shut, sealing out the noise and the cold, I pulled out my phone. I dialed the number for Tessa. She answered on the first ring. Status? Tessa asked. The target has been engaged, I said, watching my family fade into the rearview mirror as we pulled away. He is panicked, he is broke, and he is angry. He is going to try to move money tomorrow morning to cover his tracks. I am ready for him, Tessa said. Good, I said. Initiate Blackline protocol. Effective immediately. I want every account frozen. I want every asset tagged. I want the audit report sent to the Kestrel North Board of Directors at 8 a.m. sharp. Burn it all down. Tessa. With pleasure, she replied. I hung up the phone and looked at Noah. He was leaning back in the seat, watching the city lights blur by. Mom? He asked. Is this our car? Yes, Noah, I said softly. This is our car. It's cool, he said sleepy. Get some rest, I whispered. Tomorrow is going to be a very big day. Tomorrow. The breadbasket wouldn't be the only thing that was empty. Tomorrow. Graham Arden's entire world was going to be insufficient funds. The phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was not a polite hour to call, but my mother, Mary Ann, had never respected the boundaries of time when it came to her needs. To her, my time was a public utility, free for the taking, while Camille's time was a precious commodity that had to be booked weeks in advance. I stared at the screen, seeing the name Mom flashing like a warning light. I let it ring 3 times before answering, composing my voice into the flat, neutral tone that I had perfected over 3 decades of being the disappointment of the family. Violet, she said, dispensing with greetings. We need you here by 10. The caterer canceled on the appetizers, and the cleaning crew did a rush job on the patio. Your father's birthday party is tonight, and I need you to handle the food and the setup. It was a command, not a request. I sat up in bed, looking at the sunlight streaming through my window, thinking of the quiet weekend I had planned with Noah. Mom, I have plans with Noah, I said calmly. And I am not a caterer. You have a budget for this. Hire someone. We can't hire someone on such short notice, she snapped. And besides, we are saving the budget for the main event. Camille is buying your father a car. Violet, a brand new luxury sedan, a $50,000 gift. She is spending a fortune to make this day special for him. The least you can do, since you cannot contribute financially, is contribute with your hands. It is called sweat equity. There it was, the transaction. Camille buys the love with money she likely does not have, and I am expected to pay for my existence with manual labor. The dynamic was so predictable it was almost boring. I can't do it, Mom, I said, testing the waters. I am tired. The line went silent for a moment, and then her voice dropped to that low, dangerous register she used when she was about to twist the knife. Fine, she said. Don't come, but don't blame me when Aunt Linda and the rest of the church council ask why you aren't there. I will just have to tell them the truth, that you are too selfish to help your own father on his 60th birthday, that you are jealous of your sister's success and refuse to participate. You know how people talk. Violet, it would be a shame if everyone in town thought you were an ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family. She was weaponizing my reputation. She knew that even though I lived quietly, I valued my dignity. She was threatening to paint me as the villain in her social circle, a stigma that sticks in a southern town like wet cement. I closed my eyes, a year ago. This would have crushed me. I would have rushed over, apologizing, begging for the chance to scrub the floors just to stop her from bad-mouthing me. But today, her threat did not induce panic. It induced strategy. I needed to get back into that house. I had initiated the Blackline protocol on Graham. But I knew that a man like him, when cornered, would look for a lifeline. He would look for liquid assets to plug the holes in his sinking ship before the audit report hit the board of directors on Monday. And the biggest asset available to him was not his own, but my parents' house. It was a sprawling colonial estate, paid off years ago, sitting on prime real estate. If Graham was desperate, he would try to leverage it. I needed to see the paperwork. I needed access to my father's study. Okay, I said, infusing my voice with a fake resignation. You are right. I will be there. I will help. Good, she said, her tone instantly brightening. Having won the round. Wear something practical. Violet, you will be in the kitchen most of the time. I hung up. I looked at Noah, who was still sleeping soundly. I would not bring him into the line of fire without armor. I woke him up gently and told him we were going to Grandma's house. But it was going to be a game, a secret mission. When we pulled into the driveway of my childhood home 2 hours later, the house looked impeccable. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. Balloons were tied to the mailbox. But I did not see a home. I saw a stage set for a tragedy. Camille was standing on the porch, directing a delivery crew with the imperious air of a general. When she saw me get out of my car, her eyes raked over my jeans and t-shirt with disdain. "Finally," she said, "the help arrives." She reached into a bag at her feet and pulled out a black apron. It was a heavy, industrial-style apron, the kind worn by bussers and dishwashers. She thrust it at me. "Put this on," she ordered. "Why?" I asked, taking the fabric. "Because we have important guests coming," Camille said, checking her reflection in the window. "Senators, business partners, Graham's boss might even stop by. I don't want anyone confused about the hierarchy here. Violet, if you are wandering around in regular clothes, people might think you are a guest and try to talk to you about things you don't understand. If you wear the apron, they will know you are just there to serve drinks and clear plates. It saves everyone the embarrassment." It was a blatant attempt to dehumanize me. She wanted to erase my identity, to reduce me to a function. She wanted to make sure that while she played the benefactor, I played the servant. I looked at the apron. In another life, I would have thrown it in her face. But in this life, in the middle of a corporate takedown, the apron was perfect. It was a cloak of invisibility. No one looks at the server. No one lowers their voice when the maid walks by. If I wore this, I could move through the rooms like a ghost. I could listen. I could observe. And most importantly, I could slip into the study unnoticed. "You are right, Camille," I said submissively, tying the strings around my waist. "I wouldn't want to confuse anyone." She smiled, satisfied. "Good. Start in the kitchen. The shrimp need to be arranged." I took Noah inside. I had brought his noise-canceling headphones and his tablet. I set him up in the sunroom at the back of the house, a room that was rarely used. "Stay here, buddy," I told him, looking him in the eye. "This is your base. You have your movies. You have your snacks. Do not go into the living room. The adults are going to be loud and boring. You are safe here. If you need me, you text me on the special app, okay?" "Okay, Mom," he said, happy to be left alone with his game. "Are you going to be okay?" "I am just going to serve some snacks," I said. "I will be right back." I went to work. For the next 3 hours, I was the model of domestic servitude. I arranged trays. I chilled wine. I polished silverware. My mother ignored me, except to bark orders about the napkin folds. My father didn't even acknowledge my presence, too busy pacing the floor and rehearsing his thank you speech for the car he thought he was getting. By 6 in the evening, the house was full. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the drone of shallow conversation. I moved through the crowd with a silver tray of crab puffs, keeping my head down, blending into the wallpaper. It was amazing what people said when they thought no one was listening. I circled a group of men standing near the fireplace. Graham was in the center, holding a glass of scotch that I knew he hadn't paid for. He was flushed, his tie loosened, holding court with a few of his old college buddies and a local banker named Davis. "It is a done deal," Graham was saying, his voice low but boastful. "The promotion is just the first step. I have a private venture lining up. Big returns. I am talking triple digits within the first quarter." "Sounds risky." "Graham," Davis the banker said, swirling his drink. "You have the liquidity for the buy-in?" "I am moving some assets around," Graham said quickly. "Liquidating some old property. You know how it is. You have to spend money to make money. I am signing the final paperwork on the collateral this weekend. Once that capital hits, I am golden." My grip tightened on the silver tray. Collateral. He was talking about using property to secure a loan. But Graham didn't own any property. They rented their McMansion in the suburbs. The only unencumbered deed in the family belonged to Elliot and Marianne Holmes. He was planning to mortgage my parents' house to cover his fraud. He was going to convince them to sign it over, probably under the guise of estate planning or tax optimization, and then use it to pay back the money he had stolen from Kestrel North before the audit caught him. He was going to drown them to save himself. I walked away before I dropped the tray. I needed to confirm it. I headed toward the front door to clear my head. The gift was parked in the driveway, wrapped in a giant red bow. It was a sleek silver sedan, gleaming under the porch lights. Guests were admiring it, oohing and eyeing at Camille's generosity. I walked past the admirers, acting like I was checking for empty glasses on the porch railing. I moved close to the rear of the car. I looked at the license plate. Usually, when you buy a new car, the frame carries the name of the dealership, Hendrick Motors or South Charlotte Luxury. But this frame was black and discreet. I squinted in the dim light. Prestige Exotics, daily weekly rentals. I felt a cold laugh bubble up in my chest. They hadn't bought the car. They couldn't afford to buy the car. They had rented it for the weekend to stage a photo op. They were going to give my father the keys, let him cry tears of joy, take the pictures for Facebook to prove how rich and successful they were, and then come up with some excuse on Monday to take it back. Oh, it needs detailing. Oh, there was a recall on the sensors. It was all a lie. The promotion, the money, the car, the entire foundation of their superiority was made of smoke. I went back inside. The party was reaching its peak. My mother was clapping her hands, calling everyone to the living room for the speeches. This was my chance. While everyone was distracted by the performance of the loving daughter presenting the fake gift, the hallway to the study would be empty. I slipped past the kitchen, down the long corridor, and opened the door to my father's home office. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. I closed the door softly behind me and didn't turn on the light. The glow from the street lamps outside filtered through the blinds, casting long, prison bar shadows across the mahogany desk. I moved to the desk. My father was old school. He didn't trust the cloud. He kept everything in physical files. I opened the top drawer. Nothing. I tried the second drawer. It was locked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thin metal pick. Lockpicking was a skill I had picked up during my first year of auditing. Not because I was a burglar, but because sometimes the evidence you need is behind a cabinet door that the CEO lost the key to. I felt for the tumblers. Click, click, the lock turned. I slid the drawer open. There, sitting right on top, was a folder labeled Graham Investment Strategy. I opened it. My eyes scanned the documents in the half-light. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't just a loan. It was a quit-claim deed. A legal document transferring the title of the house from Elliot and Marianne Holmes to Camille and Graham Arden for the sum of $1. Attached to it was a secondary document, a draft application for a hard money loan using the property as collateral, with an expedited payout scheduled for Monday morning. They weren't just borrowing against the house, they were stealing it. They were going to trick my father into signing over the deed tonight, claiming it was for asset protection, and then Graham was going to strip the equity out of it at 9 a.m. to pay back Kestrel North. If I hadn't been here, if I hadn't worn the apron and played the ghost, my parents would have been homeless within 6 months. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I froze. The doorknob turned. I didn't panic. I quickly slid the folder back into the drawer, but I kept one document, the quitclaim deed, and folded it into the pocket of my apron. I pushed the drawer shut just as the door opened. It was my mother. She stood silhouetted in the doorway, the noise of the party behind her. She squinted into the dark room. "Violet?" she hissed. "What are you doing in here? The guests are waiting for champagne. Why are you hiding in the dark?" I turned to her, my face a mask of subservience. "I was just looking for the extra napkins. Mom," I said, "I thought you kept a box in here." She huffed, annoyed. Napkins are in the pantry. You useless girl. Get out there. Graham is about to make the toast. Yes. Mom, I said. I walked past her, brushing against her arm. She didn't feel the heat radiating off me. She didn't feel the trembling rage. She only saw the apron. I walked back into the living room. Graham was standing by the fireplace, raising his glass. Camille was hanging on his arm, looking at him with adoration that I now knew was fueled by desperation. To Elliot, Graham announced, his voice booming. A man who built a legacy, and to family, because when it comes down to it, family is the only thing you can bank on. The guests cheered. My father wiped a tear from his eye. I stood in the back, in the shadows, my hand resting on the paper in my pocket. I looked at the walls of the house I grew up in. I looked at the family photos hanging there, images of a happiness that had never really existed. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene. And I was the only witness. I looked at Graham. He was smiling, thinking he had pulled it off. He thought he had the car, the house, and the reputation secure. He didn't know that the servant in the corner had just pocketed the detonator. I touched the earpiece I wore, a small, wireless bud connected to my phone. Tessa, I whispered, barely moving my lips. I am here, my assistant's voice came back, clear and sharp. I have the document, I said. He is trying to execute a title transfer tonight. He is going to try to cash out on Monday. Do you want me to block the county recorder's office? Tessa asked. No, I said, watching Graham hug my father. Let him sign it. Let him think he has won. But prepare the interception when he tries to leverage the deed on Monday. I want the bank to realize that the property is already flagged. Flagged for what? Tessa asked. Tax liens, I said. The liens I bought 2 years ago. The ones I never officially cleared from the record because I knew this day might come. I watched my father shake Graham's hand. Let him steal the house, I whispered. Because he is stealing a bomb. I turned and walked back toward the kitchen to get more champagne. The apron felt lighter now. It wasn't a uniform of servitude anymore. It was camouflage for the soldier who was about to burn the enemy camp to the ground. The party was vibrating through the floorboards. A dull, rhythmic thumping of bass and polite laughter that felt a world away from the silence of my father's study. The air in the room was stagnant, smelling of old leather and the expensive cigars Graham had handed out earlier like party favors. I stood before the mahogany desk, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind me. Sealing us in, my father, Elliot, sat in his high-backed chair. He did not look like a man celebrating his birthday. He looked like a man concluding a business transaction. He gestured to the chair opposite him, but I remained standing. I still wore the black apron Camille had forced onto me. It was a shield, a reminder of my station in this house. Violet, he said, his voice devoid of the warmth he had shown the guests outside. We need to handle some housekeeping. He slid a document across the polished wood surface. It was a single sheet of heavy bond paper, the kind used for official legal instruments. I did not need to pick it up to know what it was. The bold letters at the top screamed its purpose. Quitclaim deed. I need you to sign this, he said, not asking, but commanding. I looked at the paper. It was a standard waiver of interest. It stated that Violet Holmes, having potential future claim to the estate via inheritance or trust, hereby waived all rights and interest in the property located at 42 Willow Creek Lane, transferring sole ownership to Camille and Graham Arden for the consideration of $1. Why? I asked, keeping my voice small, trembling just enough to sell the performance. Because Graham is going to leverage the property to expand his portfolio, my father said, leaning forward, his eyes hard. He has a vision, Violet, a massive opportunity, but the bank requires a clean title. They need to know there are no other potential claimants who could stall a foreclosure if well. Not that it will happen, but it is just a formality. We need the equity to be liquid. You are giving them the house? I asked. I am investing in the future, he corrected me sharply. Graham and Camille are the future of this family. They are building something real. They are going to take care of your mother and me in our old age. Well, let us be honest. Violet, you are not in a position to take care of anyone. You are a variable. Graham is a constant. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rental car parked in the driveway, the symbol of the wealth he desperately wanted to believe in. You have always been unstable, Violet, he continued, his back to me. Drifting from job to job. Single mother, no assets. You are a burden. I love you, but you are heavy. If I leave any part of this house to you, you will just sell it to pay off some debt or buy something frivolous. Graham will multiply the value. It is just basic economics. The door opened behind me. I didn't turn, but I felt the temperature in the room drop. Graham walked in, followed closely by Camille. They moved like a pack of wolves sensing a wounded animal. Graham walked straight to the desk and picked up a pen. He clicked it, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Is there a problem, Elliot? Graham asked, staring at me with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Is she stalling? She just has questions, my father said, sounding tired. Violet, just sign it. Don't make this difficult. Graham leaned against the edge of the desk, invading my personal space. He smelled of scotch and arrogance. Look, Violet, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. I know this is hard for you to understand. Big financial moves can be intimidating, but this is for the good of the family. We are going to refinance, pull out some equity, and triple it in 6 months. Everyone wins. And if you don't? I asked, looking up at him. What if the investment fails? Mom and Dad lose their home. Graham laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Fail? I don't fail. Violet, I am a regional director. I have insight into markets you don't even know exist. But listen, if you are going to be difficult... He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menace. I know people, Violet. I know the staffing agencies you probably use to get your little online gigs. I can make a few calls. I can tell them you are unreliable. I can make sure whatever little income you're cobbling together evaporates by Tuesday. Do you want that? Do you want to explain to Noah why there's no food in the fridge because Mommy couldn't be a team player? It was a clumsy threat, the kind a bully makes when he thinks he holds all the cards. He was threatening to wreck a career I didn't have, to choke off an income stream that didn't even exist. He had no idea the staffing agencies he named were actually working for me, or that the unreliable woman standing in front of him could dismantle his whole arrangement with a single phone call. But I had to play the part. I had to let them walk straight into their own trap. I let my shoulders sag. I let my hands tremble on purpose. I looked from Graham to Camille, eyes widening with practiced panic. Please, I whispered. I can't lose my work. I have rent. Then sign, Graham said, jabbing the pen toward me. I took the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. I looked at the document again. This was the trap. They thought they were stripping me of my inheritance. In reality, they were signing a death warrant for their financial lives. 2 years ago, when I paid off the tax liens to save my parents from eviction. I didn't just pay them, I bought them. I used a shell company, Archon Solutions, to purchase the debt. I never filed the satisfaction of the lien with the county. I left it open. Accruing interest, sitting silently on the title like a sleeping dragon. As long as my parents owned the house, I held the dragon back. I let them live there, blissfully unaware that they were tenants in their own home, subject to my mercy. But a quitclaim deed changes the game when title transfers. It triggers a review, and more importantly, by signing this, my father was transferring the property subject to all existing encumbrances to Camille and Graham. Graham was not just getting a house. He was getting a house with a lien that had ballooned to nearly $100,000 in penalties and interest, and because he was planning to use the house as collateral for a hard money loan on Monday. The title search would reveal the lien. The lender would demand immediate payment. Graham would be on the hook for a 6-figure debt he didn't know existed. On a property he had just legally claimed as his own. He was stealing an anchor and tying it around his neck, but I needed one last confirmation. I needed to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there was no redemption left in them. I looked at Camille. She was checking her manicure. Bored. "Camille," I said, my voice cracking, "if I sign this, if I give you everything, can I ask for one thing?" She sighed, rolling her eyes. "What now, Violet?" "If things get hard," I said, looking at the floor, "if I lose my apartment, can Noah and I have the guest room? Just the small one over the garage? Just until I get back on my feet? I don't want to be homeless." The room went silent. My father looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Graham smirked, waiting for his wife to deliver the blow. Camille stepped forward. She didn't look sad. She didn't look conflicted. She looked annoyed that I would even ask. "Violet," she said cold, like she was explaining physics to a toddler. "We are renovating. We are going to turn that space into a home gym. And honestly, we can't have you here. You bring clutter. You bring drama. And Noah, well, he is a sweet kid, I guess. But he is loud. We are upgrading our lifestyle. We don't have room for dead weight." She paused, then added the final twist of the knife. "You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Relying on us is pathetic. No, you can't stay here. Not now. Not ever." There it was. The absolute zero of their morality. She would take the house, but she would not spare a square foot for her sister or her nephew. She would let us sleep on the street to build a home gym. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. The last thread of familial obligation snapped. "I understand," I said softly. "No dead weight." I bent over the desk. I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name, Violet Holmes, in a flowing, deliberate script. I dated it. I stood up straight. The trembling in my hands vanished. The slump in my shoulders disappeared. I placed the pen gently on the desk, right next to the deed. Graham snatched the paper up instantly, checking the signature like a greedy child checking a lottery ticket. "Finally," he breathed. "Done. You made the right choice, Violet," my father said, his relief palpable. "You will thank us later. When Graham makes this money, maybe he can help you out. Maybe buy you a used car or something." "Yeah," Graham laughed, tucking the deed into his jacket pocket. "Maybe, if you are nice." I looked at them. They were celebrating a robbery. They were high on the fumes of a victory that was actually a suicide. I untied the apron. I pulled the black fabric over my head, ruining the servant illusion. I dropped it on the floor, right at Camille's feet. "I am going to get Noah," I said. "We are leaving." "Good riddance," Camille muttered. Stepping over the apron, I walked to the door. My hand hovered over the knob. I turned back one last time. I looked at Graham, who was already pouring himself another drink to celebrate. I looked at Camille, who was already mentally redecorating the room she had just stolen. "Congrats, Camille," I said. My voice was no longer the soft, pleading whisper of the poor sister. It was the calm, leveled voice of a CEO who had just closed a hostile takeover. They looked up, startled by the change in tone. "What?" Camille asked, frowning. "The house," I said, a small, razor-thin smile playing on my lips. "It is yours, all of it, everything that comes with it." "Yeah, we know," Graham scoffed. "Jealous much?" "No," I said. "Just patient." I opened the door and walked out. I didn't run. I walked with a steady, rhythmic purpose down the hallway, past the guests who were still drinking the cheap champagne Graham had passed off as vintage. I went to the sunroom. Noah was waiting, his headphones on, lost in his world. "Pack up, buddy," I said, my voice bright and clear. "Mission accomplished." "Did we win?" he asked, taking off his headphones. "We won everything," I said. "Let's go home." We walked out the front door, past the fake rental car with the big red bow. I didn't look at it. I didn't look at the house. I walked straight to my car where Marcus was waiting. As I settled into the back seat, the silence of the luxury cabin wrapping around me like a fortress, I pulled out my phone. I opened the secure messaging app. I typed a message to Tessa, The deed is signed. Transfer of title is imminent. The liability has shifted. The target has taken the bait. 3 dots appeared instantly. Copy that. Violet, Tessa replied. The lien is active. The moment he tries to file that deed on Monday morning to get his loan, the system will flag the debt. He will be blocked from financing, and he will be legally responsible for the $112,000 in back taxes and penalties effectively immediately. He is locked in. Good, I typed, but we are not done. He thinks he is a king tonight. Let's make sure his fall is public. The Kestrel Summit is Tuesday night. Tessa reminded me, all the major shareholders will be there. The press will be there. Perfect, I replied. Prepare the full dossier. We are going to present the audit results live. I want every receipt, every stolen dollar, and the copy of this quitclaim deed on the big screen. I want to show them exactly how he treats his company and his family. Initiating legal service protocols. Tessa wrote, See you at the gala. I locked the phone. I looked out the window as we drove away from the house that had been my prison for so long. It wasn't my prison anymore. It was theirs. Graham thought he had signed a deal. He didn't realize he had signed a confession. And on Tuesday, I wasn't just going to serve him dinner. I was going to serve him justice. The Marlowe Grand Hotel does not just host events. It consecrates them. It is a fortress of marble and gold leaf. A place where the air conditioning is set to a crisp 68 degrees to keep the billionaires from sweating in their tuxedos. Tonight, the facade was bathed in the signature cobalt blue light of Kestrel North Systems. A red carpet stretched from the valet stand to the revolving brass doors, flanked by velvet ropes and security guards who looked more like paramilitary operatives than ushers. This was the Kestrel Summit and Charity Gala. It was the night Graham believed he would be crowned king. Earlier that afternoon, I had received a flurry of text messages from Camille. They were photos. Camille in a sequined gown that looked suspiciously like a rental. Graham adjusting a bow tie in front of a mirror. Looking smug. My parents holding flutes of champagne in their living room, beaming with pride. The caption on the last photo read, Heading to the VIP circle. Such a shame you have nothing appropriate to wear. Maybe next year you can watch the live stream. They had made it very clear that I was not welcome. To them, my presence would be a contamination. I was the poor relation, the embarrassment who would not know which fork to use or how to speak to the titans of industry Graham claimed to befriend. They wanted me at home, invisible, presumably crying over my exclusion while they rubbed shoulders with the elite. I was not crying. I was waiting for Marcus to open the door. At 8:15, the Arden family arrived. I watched from the tinted window of my car, parked securely in the shadow of the portico. They stepped out of a rideshare luxury van. The rental sedan from the weekend had evidently been returned for service, as I predicted. They walked the red carpet with a desperate, hungry energy. Graham waved at photographers who were not taking his picture. Camille posed for selfies every 3 feet, blocking the flow of traffic. My parents looked terrified but eager, clutching their invitations like golden tickets. They made it through the main checkpoint and vanished into the lobby. It is time, Ms. Holmes, Marcus said from the front seat. Let's go, I replied. My car pulled up to the curb. It was distinct among the sea of limousines. It was sleek, black, and radiated a quiet, menacing authority. The valet rushed to open the door, but Marcus was faster. He stepped out, buttoned his jacket, and opened the rear door for me. I stepped out. I was not wearing the drab, shapeless clothes my family was used to. I was wearing a structured, architectural gown in deep midnight blue, tailored to within a millimeter of my life. It had sharp shoulders and a plunging neckline that suggested power rather than vulnerability. My hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. I wore no jewelry except for a single, diamond-encrusted ear cuff that caught the flash of the paparazzi bulbs. The silence was immediate. The crowd near the entrance, a mix of socialites, investors, and hangers-on, stopped their chatter. They didn't know who I was, but they knew money when they saw it. Real money doesn't shout. It whispers, and right now, my silhouette was whispering loud enough to deafen them. I walked up the red carpet. I did not wave. I did not smile. I walked with the stride of a woman who owns the pavement she steps on. At the top of the stairs, the security checkpoint was bottlenecked. A line of guests waited to have their QR codes scanned. I saw my family standing just beyond the ropes in the lobby, waiting for a server to bring them drinks. Camille was laughing loudly, her head thrown back, performing happiness for an audience of strangers. Then she saw me. Her laugh died in her throat. It sounded like a car engine seizing up. She grabbed Graham's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. Graham turned, annoyed, and then he froze. My parents followed their gaze. For a moment, they just stared. They couldn't process the image. To them, Violet was the woman in the apron. Violet was the woman who drove a sedan with a dent in the bumper. Violet was the charity case. They could not reconcile that version of me with the woman walking toward the velvet ropes with a security detail trailing 2 steps behind. Camille recovered first. Her shock was replaced by a flash of indignation. She marched toward the ropes, pushing past a confused waiter. "What are you doing here?" Camille demanded, her voice shrill enough to cut through the ambient piano music. "Violet, you can't be here." She turned to the nearest security guard, a large man named Sampson who was checking IDs. "Excuse me," Camille shouted, pointing a finger at me. "This woman is not on the list. She is my sister, and she has a history of mental instability. She is trying to crash the party. You need to remove her immediately before she causes a scene. She is probably looking for free food." The crowd nearby went quiet. People love a spectacle, and Camille was serving one up on a silver platter. Graham rushed to her side, trying to look authoritative. "She is right," Graham said, puffing out his chest. "Officer, I am Graham Arden, Regional Director. This is a private corporate event. This woman is confused. Please escort her off the premises." Sampson, the security guard, looked at Graham. He looked at Graham's badge, which identified him as mid-level management. Then he looked at me. Sampson didn't ask for my ticket. He didn't ask for my ID. He unclipped the velvet rope with a snap and stepped aside, bowing his head deeply. "Good evening, Ms. Holmes," Sampson said, his voice respectful and booming. "We have been expecting you. The private elevator is ready for your ascent to the founder's suite. But Mr. Hargrove asked if you would join him in the main atrium first." Graham's jaw dropped. It wasn't a figure of speech. His mouth literally hung open. "Ms. Holmes?" Camille sputtered. "What? No, you don't understand. She is a nobody. She works on the internet. She doesn't have a ticket." "Ma'am," Sampson said, turning to Camille with a look of bored tolerance, "please step aside and clear the walkway. You are blocking the VIP entrance." "VIP?" my mother squeaked. "But we are the VIPs. Graham is the guest of honor." "Please step aside," Sampson repeated, firmer this time, his hand moving to his earpiece in a gesture that suggested he was 1 second away from calling for backup to remove them. I walked past them. I was close enough to smell the cheap hairspray Camille used. I was close enough to see the sweat beading on Graham's upper lip. I didn't look at them. I looked straight ahead, through them, as if they were made of glass. I entered the lobby. It was a cavernous space filled with 500 of the most influential people in the tech sector. Waiters circulated with champagne. A string quartet played in the corner. As I stepped onto the marble floor, a man broke away from a group of board members near the center fountain. It was Duncan Hargrove, the CEO of Kestrel North Systems. Duncan was a legend in the industry, a man known for his ruthlessness and his inability to suffer fools. He was tall, silver-haired, and possessed a gaze that could peel paint off a wall. Graham, seeing the CEO, practically tripped over his own feet trying to intercept him. "Mr. Hargrove," Graham called out, putting on his best sycophantic smile. "Graham Arden here, Regional Director. So honored you could—" Duncan Hargrove didn't even break stride. He walked right past Graham, his shoulder brushing Graham's arm, knocking him slightly off balance. Duncan didn't apologize. He didn't even acknowledge Graham existed. He walked straight to me. "Violet," Duncan said, extending his hand. The warmth in his voice was genuine, a stark contrast to the icy demeanor he showed his subordinates. "I didn't think you would make the opening reception. I thought you would be holed up in the war room." I shook his hand firmly. "The report is finalized. Duncan, my team is just scrubbing the metadata. I thought I would come down and see the subject of our study in his natural habitat." "Strategic as always," Duncan said with a grim smile. "We are ready when you are." "The board has reviewed the preliminary findings you sent this morning. To say they are displeased would be the understatement of the decade. They will be even less pleased when they see the full numbers," I said. Graham had recovered his balance and shuffled over, looking like a man who had walked into a movie halfway through and couldn't figure out the plot. He looked from Duncan to me, his brain misfiring. "Mr. Hargrove?" Graham stammered, his voice trembling. "I don't understand. You know my sister-in-law, Violet? She does data entry. Did she apply for a job with catering?" Duncan turned slowly to look at Graham. It was the look a lion gives a gazelle that has stupidly wandered into the den. "Data entry?" Duncan repeated, the words dripping with disdain. "Mr. Arden, is it? Violet Holmes is not data entry. She is the founder of Blackridge Compliance. She is the strategic partner I hired personally to clean up the mess in this company. She is the reason we are all here tonight." Graham went pale. The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. "Blackridge? The auditors?" "The scalp hunters," Duncan corrected him. "If I were you, Arden, I would grab a drink. You are going to need it." Duncan nodded to me and walked away to greet a senator, leaving me alone with my family. The circle of silence around us had grown. People were watching. They had seen the CEO snub his own director to greet the mystery woman in blue. They smelled blood in the water. Graham stared at me. His eyes were wide, frantic, darting around to see who was listening. He stepped closer, invading my space again. But this time it wasn't an act of dominance. It was panic. "What is this?" he hissed, his voice low and wet. "What is he talking about? Blackridge? You are a broke single mother. You serve appetizers at my parties. Is this some kind of prank? Did you sleep with him?" It was the last defense of a weak man. Misogyny. If a woman has power, she must have slept her way to it. "Keep your voice down, Graham," I said, my tone conversational. "You are drawing attention to yourself." "Tell me what is going on," he snapped. Grabbing my arm, I looked down at his hand on my sleeve. Then I looked up at his eyes. "Let go of me," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The threat was absolute. He released me as if my dress were made of fire. "I am here to do my job, Graham," I said. "You hired Kestrel North to fund your lifestyle. Kestrel North hired me to find out where the money went. It is a simple ecosystem. You are the parasite. I am the cure." "You audited me?" he whispered, the reality crashing down on him. "You saw?" "Everything," I said. "The dinners, the trips, the electronics, the fake vendors, and the house. Graham, I saw the house." Camille, who had been listening in stunned silence, suddenly gasped. "The house? What about the house?" "He didn't tell you?" I asked, looking at my sister with a pitying smile. "Graham didn't buy a house this weekend. He stole one, and he used you to do it." "Violet, stop," Graham pleaded, sweat pouring down his face now. "Not here. Please, we can talk about this. I can explain. It is just accounting errors. I can fix it." "It is too late for fixes," I said. "The report is filed. The board has it. The only thing left is the show." At that moment, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the main stage. The booming voice of the Master of Ceremonies filled the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kestrel Summit. Tonight is a night of revelation, a night where we honor those who have shaped the future of our company. Please take your seats." Graham straightened his tie. It was a reflex. He was so deeply deluded, so conditioned to believe he was the hero of his own story, that even after everything I just said, a small part of him still thought this was for him. He thought he could talk his way out of it. He thought that if he just got on that stage, he could charm the board, spin the numbers, and make it all go away. "That is me," Graham muttered, wiping his face with a trembling hand. "They are calling me up. I have to go. I have to accept the promotion. We will talk later. Violet, you are wrong about the numbers. I will prove it." He turned and walked toward the stage, his steps jerky and uneven. Camille followed him, looking back at me with eyes full of terror. My parents scuttled after them, confused, terrified, but still blindly following the man they thought was their savior. I watched them go. I stood alone in the center of the room, a pillar of midnight blue in a sea of shadows. I touched my earpiece. "Tessa," I said. "I am online," she replied. The presentation is queued. The evidence folder is linked to the main projector. "He is walking to the stage," I said. "He thinks he is getting an award." "He is," Tessa said, her voice dark with amusement. "He is getting exactly what he earned." I started walking toward the stage, taking a different path, flanking the crowd. I moved toward the control booth. "Let him get to the microphone," I ordered. "Let him have his moment in the light, and then turn on the screen." Graham Arden was about to find out that the only thing worse than being invisible is being seen for exactly what you are. The spotlight hit Graham Arden like a physical force. He blinked into the blinding white glare, his smile wide and practiced, the smile of a man who believes the universe has finally aligned to serve him. The applause from the floor was polite, the kind of rhythmic clapping that fills a room when people are waiting for dessert, but Graham absorbed it as if it were a standing ovation at the Oscars. "And now," the master of ceremonies announced, his voice booming through the surround sound system, "to discuss the future of our logistics division and the bold new strategies for the coming quarter. Please welcome our regional director, Graham Arden." Graham bounded up the stairs. He buttoned his jacket. He shook the MC's hand with vigorous enthusiasm. He stepped up to the plexiglass podium, gripping the sides with white-knuckled anticipation. He looked out at the sea of faces, 500 of the industry's most powerful players, plus his wife and in-laws, who were beaming from a table near the front. "Thank you," Graham said, his voice amplified, rich with false humility. "It is an honor to stand here tonight. When I look at where Kestrel North is going, I see only blue skies. I see a company that values integrity, efficiency, and smart capital allocation." I walked out from the wings. I did not rush. I did not make a sound. I simply walked onto the stage, holding a small silver remote control in my hand. I was not a waitress. I was not a sister-in-law. I was the executioner. I stopped 10 feet away from him. Graham saw me out of the corner of his eye. He faltered, his speech stuttering for a fraction of a second. He turned his head, his smile twitching into a confused grimace. "Violet?" he whispered, away from the mic. But his body language screamed panic. "Get off the stage." I ignored him. I turned to the audience. The room had gone quiet. They were confused. They saw a woman in a midnight blue gown standing with absolute authority next to the keynote speaker. "Good evening," I said. My voice was calm, clear, and perfectly modulated. I didn't need a microphone stand. I was wearing a lapel mic that the sound technician, acting on my direct orders, had just made live, while simultaneously cutting the feed to Graham's podium. Graham tapped his microphone. Thump, thump, dead silence. "My name is Violet Holmes," I announced to the room. "Most of you know me as a ghost, a name on an email, a signature on a compliance form, but officially, I am the CEO and lead forensic auditor of Blackridge Compliance Group." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. The name Blackridge meant something to these people. It meant audits. It meant investigations. It meant trouble. "I was retained by your board of directors 3 weeks ago," I continued, "to investigate a series of financial irregularities within the Southeast operations budget. Tonight, Mr. Arden intended to tell you about his vision for the future. Instead, I am going to show you his past." I raised the remote and clicked. the massive LED screen behind us, which had been displaying the Kestrel North logo, instantly changed. It was no longer a corporate background. It was a high-definition scan of a receipt. It was the bill from the Silver Marrow. The crowd squinted. The numbers were large enough to be read from the back of the room. $2,400. Exhibit A, I said, pointing to the screen. Dated 2 days ago, a dinner at the Silver Marrow in Charlotte. The expense report filed by Mr. Arden lists this as a strategic client acquisition meeting with potential investors from the energy sector. I clicked again. The screen split. On the left was the receipt. On the right was a security camera still framed from the restaurant. A photo taken from the footage I had subpoenaed. It showed Graham, Camille, my parents, and the children. As you can see, I narrated, my voice dry. The investors are his wife, his children, and his in-laws. And here, I pointed a laser pointer at the breadbasket sitting on the table in the photo, is the moment Mr. Arden's wife informed my son that we were not worth ordering food for. While eating a meal paid for by the shareholders in this room, a gasp went through the audience. It wasn't just the theft. It was the pettiness. The juxtaposition of corporate larceny and family cruelty struck a nerve. Graham's face turned the color of ash. He lunged for my microphone. "This is a lie! She is crazy! Security! Get her off the stage!" "Sit down, Graham," a voice boomed from the front row. It was Duncan Hargrove. He hadn't moved from his seat, but his voice carried the weight of God. He stared at Graham with eyes like flint. "Let her finish." Graham froze. He looked at the CEO, then back at the crowd. He realized, with a dawning horror, that he was alone. I clicked the remote again. "Exhibit B," I said. The screen changed to a vehicle invoice, Prestige Exotics, a rental agreement for a luxury sedan. Cost $2,000 for the weekend. This vehicle was expensed under Logistics Field Transport for a site survey, I explained. Mr. Arden claimed he needed a specialized vehicle to inspect a remote facility. I clicked again. A photo appeared, taken from Camille's own public Instagram account. It showed my father, Elliot, standing next to the car with a big red bow on it, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "Best son-in-law ever. Bought Dad a new whip for his birthday. Blessed rich life." In reality, I said, he rented a car using company funds, presented it to his father-in-law as a purchased gift to solicit a transfer of property assets, and intended to return it tomorrow morning. Laughter rippled through the room. It was dark. Mocking laughter. The illusion of Graham the wealthy benefactor was shattering in real time. "He rented it?" Someone in the front row whispered loud enough to be heard. "That is pathetic." Graham was shaking now. He gripped the podium as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. "These are misunderstandings. Context. You are taking things out of context." "Let's talk about context," I said. I clicked the remote. The screen filled with a cascading waterfall of invoices. Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Gucci. I read the names off the receipts as they flashed. All expensed as office supplies or vendor gifting. A trip to Cabo San Lucas listed as a regional conference. There was no conference in Cabo that week. Graham, I checked the convention center logs. It was closed for maintenance. The numbers on the screen began to tally up. A running total appeared at the bottom, ticking upward like a speedometer. 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. "You claim to be a master of efficiency," I said, turning to look him in the eye. "And you were right. You were incredibly efficient at siphoning capital into your own pocket." Graham looked at the crowd. He saw disgust. He saw shock. He saw his career evaporating into mist. He looked at Camille. She was sitting at the table, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. My parents looked like they had been struck by lightning. "Violet, please," Graham hissed, his voice cracking, audible only to me in the front row. "Don't do this. I will pay it back. I will fix it. We are family." "Family?" I asked. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black for a second. Then a screenshot of a text message conversation appeared. It was dated from last night. Sender: Camille Arden. Recipient: Graham Arden. The text read, "She signed the deed. The idiot actually signed it. We have the house. Once the loan hits on Monday, we are safe. We can pay off the credit cards, and she will never know we leveraged her inheritance to do it. Dad thinks you are a genius." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. This wasn't just corporate theft anymore. This was predatory. This was personal. This was a husband and wife conspiring to defraud their own elderly parents and disinherit a struggling sister to cover their crimes. I saw my father, Elliot, stand up slowly in the audience. He stared at the screen. He read the words. The idiot actually signed it. He looked at Camille. Camille shrank away from him, shaking her head, mouthing no, no. It's not true. But it was true. It was in 40-foot-high pixels. "You didn't just steal from the company, Graham," I said, my voice echoing through the hall. "You stole from everyone. You stole the trust of your board. You stole the retirement of your shareholders. And you tried to steal the home of the people who raised your wife?" I pointed to the running total on the screen. It stopped ticking. The final number locked in bright red digits: $742,815. "That is the cost of your vision," I said. Graham looked at the number. He looked like a man who had been punched in the gut. He slumped against the podium. The arrogance was gone. The king was dead. All that remained was a sweating, terrified thief in a suit he couldn't afford. Duncan Hargrove stood up again. He signaled to the side of the room. 2 men in dark suits walked onto the stage. They were not hotel security. They were federal agents. I had called them 2 hours ago. "Graham Arden," the lead agent said, stepping up to the podium. "We have a warrant for your arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." Graham pulled back. No, you can't. I am the regional director." "Not anymore," Duncan called out from the floor. "You are terminated. Graham, effective immediately, and Kestrel North will be pressing full charges." The agents grabbed Graham's arms. He struggled weakly, looking around for an ally, for someone to save him. He looked at Camille, but she was busy trying to hide her face from the cameras that were now flashing furiously. He looked at my parents, but my father had turned his back, slumped in his chair, a broken man. Finally, Graham looked at me. His eyes were filled with hate, but also with a profound confusion. He still couldn't understand how the woman he had mocked over a breadbasket had just orchestrated his complete destruction. "Why?" he whispered as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "It was just dinner. It was just a glitch." I leaned in close to the microphone, so every single person in the room, and every person watching the live stream, and every person in my family could hear me. "You are right, Graham," I said. "It started with a glitch. You tried to pay for your life with credit you didn't have." I looked at the handcuffs. I looked at the ruin of his life displayed on the screen behind him. "You didn't just decline a card," I said, delivering the final verdict. "You declined your own future." The agents hauled him away. The crowd watched him go. Then, as if on cue, they turned back to me. They didn't applaud. This wasn't a performance anymore. It was a funeral for a reputation. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black. "My team has the full report ready for the board," I said to Duncan. "Thank you for your time." I walked off the stage. I didn't look back at the empty podium. I didn't look back at my sister. I walked straight toward the exit, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the floor, leaving the chaos I had engineered behind me. The ballroom of the Marlowe Grand Hotel had transformed from a place of celebration into an arena of judgment. The applause that had greeted Graham only minutes ago had been replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like physical pressure. 2 federal agents flanked my brother-in-law, gripping his arms with a professional firmness that left no room for negotiation. Graham was not walking. He was being escorted, his feet dragging slightly against the plush carpet, his face a mask of shock that was rapidly melting into terror. He passed the VIP tables, the very people he had spent the last 5 years trying to impress. He looked at them, his eyes pleading for recognition, for someone to stand up and say this was all a mistake. But the titans of industry did not look back. They studied their drinks, they checked their watches, they adjusted their cufflinks. In the corporate world, failure is contagious, and Graham Arden was now a plague carrier. As they pushed him through the double doors, expelling him from the kingdom he thought he ruled, the vacuum of attention shifted instantly to the person left behind, Camille. My sister was standing near the front of the stage, her hand still covering her mouth, her body trembling in her rented sequined gown. The spotlight that had abandoned her husband seemed to linger on her, exposing every crack in her composure. She looked at the empty space where Graham had stood. Then she looked at the screen where the evidence of their betrayal was still burned into the minds of 500 witnesses. And finally, she turned her eyes to me. For a second, I thought she would collapse. I thought the weight of the public shame would drive her to her knees. But Camille possesses a specific kind of resilience, the resilience of a narcissist who cannot conceive of a world where she is the villain. Her shock curdled instantly into rage. She marched toward me. Her heels clicked sharply on the marble floor, a staccato rhythm of fury. She stopped 3 feet away, her finger raising to point at my face, her voice rising to a shriek that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "You did this!" she screamed, her face twisting into an ugly snarl. "You ruined him! You ruined everything! I will sue you, Violet! Do you hear me? I will sue you for defamation. I will sue you for slander. I will take every penny you think you have, and I will leave you in the gutter where you belong." The crowd watched, fascinated. They were witnessing a socialite implode in real time. "I did not defame anyone, Camille," I said, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with her hysteria. "Truth is an absolute defense against libel, and the truth is, you helped him do it." "You are a liar!" she yelled, stepping closer, looking like she might physically attack me. "We bought that house. It is ours. You are just jealous because Dad gave it to us." "Excuse me, Mrs. Arden?" The voice came from behind her. It was flat, bored, and bureaucratic. Camille spun around. A man in a rumpled gray suit was standing there. He looked out of place amidst the tuxedos and gowns. He held a thick manila envelope in his hand. "Who are you?" Camille snapped. "Get away from me." "Camille Arden?" the man asked. Verifying the target. "Yes, what do you want?" "You have been served," he said. He thrust the envelope into her hands. It was heavy. "What is this?" she demanded, staring at it. "Notice of default and immediate demand for payment," the man recited, as if reading from a script he had memorized 1,000 times. "Regarding the property at 42 Willow Creek Lane, since the title was transferred to your name yesterday evening, the existing lien on the property has been triggered. The holder of the debt, Archon Solutions, is exercising their right to accelerate the loan due to the change in ownership." Camille froze. Her hands shook as she tore open the envelope. She pulled out the document. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon, skipping over the clauses until they landed on the number in bold print at the bottom. $112,000, she whispered. "This says I owe $112,000? Immediately?" "Plus interest and legal fees," the process server added helpfully. "And since you are now the legal owner of record, and since the transfer was a quitclaim which accepts all encumbrances, that debt is yours personally. Archon Solutions has already filed a prejudgment writ of attachment. Your personal bank accounts have been frozen pending satisfaction of the debt." "Frozen?" Camille choked out the word. "My accounts? But I have checks out. I have the rental car deposit. I have—" She stopped. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax figure melting under heat. She realized the trap she had walked into. By rushing to steal the house from our parents to secure a loan for Graham, she had legally attached herself to a toxic asset. She hadn't just acquired a house. She had acquired a 6-figure liability, and because she had signed the deed, she couldn't claim ignorance. "No," she gasped. "No, this is a mistake. Dad, tell them." She turned to where our parents were sitting. Elliot and Marianne Holmes were still in their chairs, looking like the survivors of a shipwreck. My father was staring at the floor, his hands gripping his knees. My mother was weeping silently into a napkin. They had heard everything. They had seen the text messages on the screen. The idiot actually signed it. They knew now that the daughter they had worshipped, the daughter they had sacrificed me to elevate, had viewed them not as parents, but as a piggy bank to be smashed open. "Dad," Camille pleaded, her voice thinning into a whine. "Fix this. Tell them the house is yours. Take it back. I don't want it anymore." My father looked up. His eyes were red and hollow. He looked at Camille, and for the first time in my life, I saw him look at her without the rose-colored glasses of favoritism. He saw the greed. He saw the shallowness. "I can't take it back. Camille," he said, his voice sounding very old and very tired. "You made me sign it. You said it was for the future. You said I was holding you back. Well, you have the future now. It is all yours." "But I can't pay this," Camille screamed, waving the paper. "They froze my money. Violet, you did this. You knew." I stepped forward. The process server stepped back, sensing the shift in power. "Yes, Camille," I said. "I knew. I bought that debt 2 years ago to keep Mom and Dad from being evicted. I kept it quiet because I didn't want to shame them. I let it sit there, protecting them, as long as the house was theirs. But the moment you took it, the moment you decided to steal their home to pay for Graham's fraud, the protection expired. You own the debt?" Camille stared at me, her brain struggling to comprehend that the sister she called a failure was actually her creditor. "Archon Solutions is a subsidiary of Blackridge," I explained simply. "I am your landlord, Camille, and I am your bank, and unlike Mom and Dad, I do not accept IOUs based on family loyalty." "You did this to hurt us," she hissed, tears streaming down her face now, ruining her makeup. "You are evil. You did this just to gloat." "I did not do this to gloat," I said, my voice hardening. "I did this because your husband stole $700,000 from innocent people to pretend he was a big man. I did this because you looked at my son and treated him like garbage because you thought you were untouchable. I did this because you needed to learn that you cannot build a life on the backs of people you think are beneath you." I paused, letting the words land. "Noah is at home," I said softly. "He is sleeping in his own bed, safe, warm, and dreaming. He is not here watching his mother get dragged away by police. He is not watching his father cry over a bank account. I protected him from this. Can you say the same for your children?" Camille flinched. Her children were not here, but they would wake up tomorrow to a world where their father was a felon and their mother was bankrupt. "Violet," she sobbed, her anger suddenly collapsing into desperation. She reached out and grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, frantic. "Violet, please, we are sisters. You can't let them take everything. Just lift the freeze, please, just for a few days so I can get a lawyer, so I can get groceries. Please, for family." She was playing the card, the ultimate card, the "We Are Blood" card that she had used 1,000 times to get her way. She looked at me with those big, tear-filled eyes that had always melted my parents' resolve. I looked at her hand on my arm. It was the same hand that had pushed the breadbasket toward my son. "Family," I repeated slowly. "Yes," she cried, nodding. "We are family. We have to help each other." "Do you remember what you said to me yesterday?" I asked. "In the study? When I asked you, begging you, if Noah and I could have the guest room if we were homeless?" Camille stopped crying. She froze. She remembered. "You said no," I reminded her. "You said there was no room for dead weight. You said you were turning it into a home gym." I gently, but firmly, peeled her fingers off my arm. I dropped her hand. It fell to her side like a dead thing. I am just respecting your rules. Camille, I said, I am standing on my own 2 feet. Now it is time for you to stand on yours. I turned away from her. Security guards were now moving in. The show was over. The gala needed to continue. Or at least, the unsightly mess needed to be removed so the rich people could go back to their champagne. Mrs. Arden, a guard said, taking Camille's elbow, we need to ask you to leave. The hotel has revoked your access. But my husband, she stammered. Your husband is in the custody of the FBI, the guard said. You need to exit the premises. Camille looked around one last time. She saw the faces of the women she had bragged to earlier. They were turning their backs, examining the flower arrangements, pulling their shawls tighter as if she were a cold draft. The social isolation was instant and absolute. She looked at her purse. It was a clutch from a designer collection, worth $3,000. She clutched it to her chest. It contained credit cards that didn't work, a phone that was blowing up with bad news, and keys to a house she couldn't afford. It was a useless, shiny brick. She walked toward the door, her head down, sobbing. My parents followed her, shuffling like ghosts, leaving behind the world they had so desperately wanted to be part of. I watched them go. I felt a presence beside me. It was Duncan Hargrove. He was watching the exit, his expression grim. You were thorough, he said. I had to be, I replied. Graham is in a room downstairs with internal affairs, Duncan said. He is trying to cut a deal. He is offering to give up names of other people in the department if we let him walk. He doesn't realize there is no deal to be made. He is radioactive. Everyone he ever worked with is deleting his number as we speak. That is the way of the world, I said. Loyalty is expensive. Graham couldn't afford it. And you? Duncan asked, looking at me. Are you okay? I am just doing my job, I said. Send the final payment for the audit to the business account. Duncan, I will have the supplemental report on your desk by morning. You are scary, Violet, he said, but there was respect in his voice. Only to the people who deserve it, I said. I turned and walked toward the exit. I didn't rush. I walked past the whispering crowds, past the security checkpoint, past the spot where Camille had tried to have me thrown out. I pushed through the revolving brass doors and stepped out into the night. The air was crisp and cold, a sharp contrast to the stifling heat of the ballroom. The city lights of Charlotte twinkled in the distance, indifferent to the tragedy that had just played out inside. Marcus was waiting with the car door open. The engine was running. A low, comforting hum. I took a deep breath. It tasted like ozone and victory, but it wasn't the manic, high-pitched victory that Graham had sought. It was a quiet, solid thing. It was the feeling of a debt being settled. I looked back at the hotel one last time. I thought of my family huddled in the parking lot, waiting for a rideshare because they couldn't drive the rental and they couldn't access their funds. I thought of the long, hard road ahead of them. They would remember this night for the rest of their lives. They would remember the lights, the applause, and the sudden, brutal drop into the dark. This is the part they will remember, I whispered to the wind. I got into the car. Home, Ms. Holmes? Marcus asked. Yes, Marcus, I said, leaning back into the seat. Home to Noah. The wind on the sidewalk outside the Marlowe Grand was biting, carrying the kind of damp chill that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. It was a stark contrast to the climate-controlled luxury we had just departed, and for my family, it was the first taste of their new reality. They stood huddled near the valet stand, not because they were waiting for a car, but because they had nowhere else to go. Their rideshare app was declining their requests due to the freeze on Camille's cards, and Graham was currently in the back of a federal vehicle, speeding toward an arraignment that would end his career. I walked toward them. Marcus stood by the open door of my car, a silent sentinel. But I signaled him to wait. I had one last delivery to make. Camille saw me coming. Her makeup was streaked with mascara, turning her eyes into hollow, dark pools. She was shivering in her thin sequined gown, clutching the useless deed to the house against her chest as if it were a holy relic that could ward off the demons of bankruptcy. When she saw me, her posture stiffened. Even now, amidst the ruins of her life, she tried to summon the ghost of her superiority. "You think you have won," Camille hissed, her teeth chattering. "But you haven't. I still have the house. See? I have the deed. It is in my name. You can't kick us out. We have a roof over our heads, which is more than you can say for your soul." She was clinging to the technicality of ownership, ignoring the avalanche of liability attached to it. She was desperate to hold on to one thing that made her feel higher than me. I stopped in front of her. I was warm in my coat, calm, and holding a small, beautifully wrapped package in my hands. It was a wicker basket, covered in cellophane, tied with a gold ribbon. Inside, resting on a bed of linen napkin, were 4 warm, crusty sourdough rolls I had asked the kitchen to pack for me before I left. "Here," I said, extending the basket to her. Camille looked at it, confused. "What is this?" "Take it," I said. She reached out instinctively and took the basket. The warmth of the bread radiated through the plastic, heating her frozen fingers. She looked down at the rolls, and then up at me, the realization dawning slowly, painfully. "Bread fills you up faster, right?" I asked. The words hung in the air between us, a perfect, mirrored echo of the insults she had thrown at my son just 48 hours ago. Back then, she had said it to starve him of dignity. Now, I said it to feed her reality. "You," she choked, looking at the bread as if it were poison. "It is fresh," I said, "and it is free, which is good, because you are going to need to save your money." "I have the house," she screamed, throwing the basket onto the pavement. The rolls spilled out, steaming in the cold night air. "I own the property. You can't touch me there." "Camille," I said, my voice dropping to a register of absolute, terrifying calm. "You do not seem to understand how debt works. Yes, you own the title, but my company owns the mortgage lien. And because you are now the legal owner, and because you are currently insolvent due to the freeze on your accounts, you are in default. I can foreclose on that house tomorrow morning." My parents, Elliot and Marianne, let out a collective gasp. They had been standing behind Camille, using her anger as a shield, but now they stepped forward, their faces gray with fear. "Foreclose?" my father stammered. "Violet, no, that is our home. We built that life. You wouldn't put your own parents on the street." "I wouldn't," I agreed. "But Camille might. She is the one who signed the deal. She is the one who took the asset and the debt." "Please," my mother wept, reaching for my hand but stopping short when she saw the look in my eyes. "Violet, please, we have nowhere to go. We are old. Don't punish us for her mistakes." "I am not punishing you," I said. "I am setting terms. Something you never did with her." I reached into my purse and pulled out a document. It was a lease agreement, drafted by my legal team earlier that day. I held it out to my father. "I will hold off on the foreclosure," I said. "On 3 conditions." My father grabbed the paper with shaking hands. Anything. Violet." "Condition 1, I said, holding up a finger. "You sign this lease. It acknowledges that Archon Solutions, my company, holds the controlling interest in the property. You will pay rent. It will be fair market value, not a penny less. If you miss a payment, the eviction notice is automatic. No family discounts. No, we will pay you next week. You pay on the 1st, or you leave." My father nodded vigorously. "We will pay. We have our pension. We will pay. Condition 2, I continued. I want a handwritten letter from both of you, and from Camille, addressed to Noah. I want you to apologize for every time you made him feel small. I want you to apologize for the bread basket. I want you to apologize for making him feel like a second-class citizen in his own family. And I want you to admit that you were wrong, not just sorry if feelings were hurt, but specifically, factually wrong." "We will write it tonight," my mother promised. Wiping her eyes, And condition 3, I said, turning my gaze back to Camille. She was standing over the spilled bread, shivering, looking like a wet cat. Camille is banned from the property, I said. Camille's head snapped up. What? You can't do that? That is my parents' house. I own the deed. You own a piece of paper that says you owe me $112,000, I corrected her. If you step foot on that property, I will consider it a breach of the agreement, and I will trigger the foreclosure immediately. Mom and Dad will be on the street because you wanted to visit. I looked at my parents. That is the deal. You can have a roof over your heads, or you can have Camille. You cannot have both. It was a cruel choice, perhaps, but it was necessary. Camille was the poison in the well, unless she was cut off. She would drain them dry again. My mother looked at Camille. She looked at the daughter she had idolized, the daughter who had just tried to sell them out for a promotion. Then she looked at the lease in my father's hand, the only thing standing between them and homelessness. I am sorry, Camille, my mother whispered. Mom, Camille shrieked. You can't be serious. You are choosing her over me? We are choosing survival, my father said, his voice cracking. He looked at me. We accept the terms, Violet. Good, I said. Tessa will send over the digital copy for signatures in the morning. I turned to Camille. She was alone now, truly alone. Her husband was in jail. Her parents had just closed their door to her. Her assets were frozen. She stood on the sidewalk in a $3,000 dress that she couldn't return, staring at the sister she had tormented for decades. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered, her voice broken. I don't know, I said. But you are resourceful. Camille, you are the golden child. I am sure you will figure it out. Just don't come to my house. There is no room for dead weight. I turned and walked away. I heard her sobbing behind me, a raw, ugly sound that mixed with the city traffic. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel glee. I felt the heavy, satisfying clunk of a book being closed. I felt the silence that comes after a storm has finally blown itself out. I got into the car. Marcus closed the door, shutting out the cold and the noise. We are done here, Marcus, I said. Take me home. 40 minutes later, I was walking through the front door of my townhouse. It was quiet. The air smelled of lavender and peace. I kicked off my heels and walked to the living room. The babysitter was reading on the couch. She looked up and smiled. He is awake. He wanted to wait up for you. I went to Noah's room. He was sitting up in bed, surrounded by his Lego sets, wearing his favorite dinosaur pajamas. When he saw me, his face lit up with a sleepy smile. Mom, he said, did you finish your work? Yes, baby, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed and pulling him into a hug. I finished it all. Are we poor again? He asked. A lingering worry from the dinner still stuck in his mind. No, I said, kissing the top of his head. We were never poor. Noah, we were just quiet, but we don't have to be quiet anymore. I looked at him. He was so small, so good. He didn't care about the gala or the money or the revenge. He just wanted his mom. Are you hungry? I asked. He nodded. A little bit. Come on, I said. Let's have a late-night feast. We went to the kitchen. I didn't make lobster. I didn't make steak. I heated up a frozen pizza, the kind with the stuffed crust that he loved. We took it out to the small balcony off the living room. We sat on the outdoor sofa, wrapped in a thick blanket, looking at the stars above the city. We ate the pizza from paper plates. It was greasy and hot and perfect. Noah chewed thoughtfully, swinging his legs. He looked at the slice in his hand, then looked up at me. Mom? He asked. Yeah, Bud? Do I have to eat bread because I'm not worthy? He asked. The question was innocent, but it carried the weight of the wound Camille had inflicted. My heart broke a little, but I knew how to fix it. No, I said firmly, turning him to face me. Noah, listen to me. People like Aunt Camille, they think that because they have expensive things, they are important. They think that if they make other people feel small, it makes them feel big, but that is a lie. I wiped a smudge of tomato sauce from his cheek. You never have to eat the bread unless you want the bread, I told him. And you never, ever have to ask anyone for permission to be respected. You demand it, and if they don't give it to you, you walk away, because you are a king. Remember? Noah smiled. It was a real smile this time, reaching his eyes. I remember. Good, I said. Now, do you want the last piece? Yes, please, he said, grabbing the slice. I watched him eat. I took a deep breath of the night air. For the first time in 36 years, I didn't feel the shadow of the Arden family looming over me. I didn't feel the weight of their judgment. I had cut the anchor. I had burned the bridge, and in the light of the flames, I could finally see clearly. It wasn't about revenge. Revenge is a fire that consumes the person holding the torch. This was about sanitation. I had cleaned my life. I had removed the toxicity so that my son could grow in clean soil. I looked at the city lights one last time. Somewhere out there, Graham was sitting in a cell. Camille was sitting in a cheap motel or a 24-hour diner, staring at a bleak future. My parents were sitting in a house they no longer owned, writing a letter of apology they should have written years ago. And I was here, eating pizza on a balcony with the only person who mattered. I thought about the basket of bread I had handed to Camille. It was the perfect closing note. A circle completed, they offered my son a bread basket like a warning. I turned it into a receipt, signed, dated, and paid in full. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed Violet's journey from silence to storm. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Drop your location in the comments below so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this payback, please make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story get heard by even more people. Your support means the world to us.